All right, so what's up, everybody? Thanks for clicking this video. Thanks for tuning into my channel. My name's Simon Hill, Black American from Louisiana, coming to you live from Budapest, Hungary. It's about 4 p.m. where we are. Sorry if we're doing this early at your hometown, state, country, region, wherever you are. But today we are reviewing American fiction, and I'm here with my beautiful, sexy wife. Say hi, boo.
Hey everyone, I'm AKDI and I'm ready to review this movie.
Right. So we got about 2 hours until we have to depart, but we really want to break this film down because I believe this is one of the best comedy movies I've seen in a long time that came from my country. They say that comedy is dead. No new comedic films are, making money or shaping the culture, but I think this one really did shake new ground. And we just finished watching American Fiction, the 2023 comedy drama film written by Cord Jefferson, and I really liked it. What did you think of it?
I really liked it too. It was just like very enjoyable. It just like it didn't feel like it was long, and I was like just really invested in the story of this man's life. And I don't know, like when we finished the movie, I just felt like warm, and also it left me thinking about certain topics and just about the movie itself. So it was a very nice experience.
Definitely. Cord Jefferson is the director for this, and this is his very first movie that he directed. So I have to tell him he has a very bright career as a director because it did not feel like an amateurish movie. The movie felt very mature, very clean, very smooth in its flow, very warm in its acting and the way it told its story. So shout out to Cord Jefferson for taking this book that was written over 20 years ago by this guy named Percival Everett. He wrote a book called Erasure, and that's like the basis for this movie. He brought that book alive, and it felt like a novel. It felt like there were many different storylines and many different themes going on within it. So once again, shout out to Percival for writing the book, and shout out to Cord for bringing the story to life.
Yes. I mean, from what I read, I think he directed a couple of series, but this was his first movie. So yeah, definitely shout out to him. I think he did a great job.
Excellent job. Excellent job. And the acting as well. What did you think of the acting?
Acting was just great, and I was just like actually reading about it, and I realized as I read it, and the main character Monk, like they thought like it's such a hard character to act because it's sort of like this grumpy character, but he's also very much likable. Like he's funny, and he's he loves and he hates, and he's such a real character. And I think like the actor who played it, I don't know his name, but he did a very good job, and also all the other characters were really good too.
Right. The guy who plays the main character, Dr. Thelonious Monk Ellison, his name is Jeffrey Wright. And I feel like I've seen him in different things before, but his he's not like the prime actor. He's not a very, very famous actor. He was in the movie Rustin that came out last year. He was also in The Batman. So he was I remember him now. Remember that Batman movie we hated back in 2022?
Yeah.
He played the lead cop, Jim Gordon. He was in there. But he had a very small role, I would say. And yeah, he's been in quite a few other movies going back to the 90s. He began his career back in 1990. But this, I believe, might be his breakout role or the one that gets him the most attention since he is the lead actor. But he did a great job as well. You there?
Okay. Yeah, I'm here.
All right. Anyway, the other actors that are in this movie, we have Tracy Ellis Ross as Dr. Lisa Ellison. That's Monk's sister. We have Issa Rae as Centaura Golden. Sterling K. Brown as Dr. Clifford. Cliff Ellison, that's the brother of the main character. John Ortiz as Arthur. He's the publisher. Erica Alexandra as Coraline. And I have to say, Erica Alexandra did a good job on playing the girl next door. I watched the interview before we did this movie review, and Erica Alexandra was trying to promote the movie, and she said that this movie gave her the chance for her as a black woman to be seen as like desirable, soft, the fun, friendly girl next door sort of character that we don't see a lot of black female actresses get the opportunity to play, and I feel like she brought that to life.
Yeah, I mean, I think her character was like really smart, really intuitive, really like sort of helped Monk a little bit, like to find himself a little bit, I would say, or at least question himself a little bit with their conversations and things like that. So I think like I really like her character.
Yeah. Was there any character in particular you really liked?
I liked the brother a lot, Clifford. Cliff. And I also liked Coraline a lot too, but yeah, Cliff was just like he was just raw and funny, and he was going through some stuff, but he was just like himself unapologetically. And that's why I loved his character so much.
Yeah, definitely. I would say he wasn't unapologetically himself fully. I feel like Cliff had a lot of anger issues inside of him, so he wasn't like acting like his full self. In certain scenes, like when he's with his mom, and then certain scenes when he's like by himself or with his brother, he acts totally different. So I do think there's like some variance in his character, but we'll break that down in the story. So shall we get into the storyline?
Yep.
All right. So the movie opens with basically Monk teaching a class. It looks like he's a university professor, and he's in front of the class, and he writes on the board the name of some old book from antebellum South America, like antebellum Southern America, and in the title the word nigger is in it, like the N word is in it. And this white girl says, I don't think we should be looking at that word. That word is offensive. And Monk is like, if I can get over it, I think you can get over it. And then, they have some fight and she storms out of the classroom and he's yelling at his class, does anybody have any questions about the text? And then he gets called into the office by his superiors and they say, Monk, we think you need to take a break. You've been having a lot of arguments with students. You called one German student a Nazi. And they're telling him that maybe he should go to Boston to be with his family. And he hates Boston because his family is there. So that lets us know he has like tension within his life. What did you think about the first two like opening scenes?
I mean, obviously, it was funny that this girl was fighting his professor about like the N word, and just from the beginning scene, it makes us question, like, I don't know, as a at least white perceived person, I'm thinking, okay, should white people be offended about like racial slurs or racist things when black people are not?
That's a very deep question. And I think this movie has so many deep questions that if we really wanted to get into them, it would take an hour. But my opinion is that white people should be offended by racial slurs. But there should be some, how can I say this, sense on how to read the room, some empathy, especially when you're dealing with a black man who's in front of you as an educator and he's
Yeah.
trying to teach you about a text. If he's trying to teach you, you should at least have some basic respect for your teacher and not confront him about the word. Yes, you should be offended. You should not use that word. But in educational circumstances, this word has to be studied and understood, as well as racism in general.
Yeah. I mean, I do agree with that. In the setting, it was kind of like unnecessary to get mad at this word since it was being studied. Yeah, but yeah, just in general, this scene made me think of that.
And throughout the entire movie, because this sets the entire tone, the racism that exists in this movie mostly comes from white liberals, people who would identify on the left, or they're not the traditional racists that we see in movies who are usually conservatives saying hard R.
They're
you know,
concerned. They're like woke people, right?
yeah, they're woke. So we have to talk about this. And throughout the movie, there are instances where white people try to be woke. Like the publisher says, I've been reading about the prison abolition movement. Or one person says, I think it's time we listen to people of color and stuff like that. And so they're trying too hard to be, how can I say this, woke, progressive, and that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
What did you think of that?
I mean, that's just a funny thing to like see. I don't think like there has been some shows and movies that shown that, like Atlanta or like Issa Rae's own show. But I don't know. It just always makes me think like it makes me think that, okay, so why are people like, there either has to put this blackness thing into a certain box, like I don't know, like it's hard to explain. But I just feel like being black is being black, and you don't need to put it in a positive or a negative like light. And I think like one of the great things that this movie does is just like telling a story of a man that has to deal with like positive racism, I guess, also negative racism, but he's just like trying to live his life. He even doesn't believe in race, but he has to like conform to certain things because people perceive him that way. And at the end of the day, what he perceives himself as doesn't really matter when it comes to like society.
Right. Exactly. I think you hit the nail on the head with that one. Thelonious throughout the entire movie has to be different than himself to get the attention and the rewards and awards he wants and that sort of stuff. And he has to do this balancing act of being black enough to be successful, ironically, and also trying to stay true to himself throughout the entire time of the movie. And I think the frustrating thing about woke liberals or white liberals or progressives who go too far in their progressivism is that for certain black folks in general, I would say that we feel like it's there are times when it's okay to be woke and there are times when you just need to chill on it. You get what I'm saying? It doesn't always have to be, you speaking up for people of color. It doesn't always have to be you talking about how much you want to defund the police. Like you have to pick your battles at certain times, but in general, you should be, on the side of righteousness, truth, and fighting for justice for all people, I would say.
Yeah.
And that's the frustrating part because, we see all the black characters in this movie put their hands in their face and sigh whenever white folks say something ridiculous because it's like, you don't actually mean it. You're just saying that to virtue signal.
Yeah, I mean, in the essence, like to be a good person, you have to just be good to everyone, regardless of what they look like, right? Or you should hear everyone's voices because no matter what you look like, everyone has different lives, right? Just because you're white doesn't mean you grew up in, rich areas. Or same for black people. Just because you're black, it doesn't mean you came from the hood. So I think that's like becomes racist in itself because just because you're woke, you think like every black person has like this insane story to tell about racism and things like that. And maybe they do, but they might not want to say that, or they might not want to live, thinking about that or anything, whatever they want to like, believe in. So it becomes racist because then you associate like people who need help with Black people. So
And that's another part of this movie. So let's continue because that's a very good point. That's a very good point. It's covered it. So basically, Thelonious makes it to Boston. He's going to be a part of this like speaker panel of authors who are talking about their books. He makes it to Boston and gets a call from his publisher, who is Arthur. And Arthur is the guy who's like his sidekick. He's trying to make sure that Monk's work is published. And Monk is a talented writer, and he's published books, but he hasn't done any new work in many years. And on top of that, his books that he has published aren't big sellers because they're usually very complicated, heady stuff like that, right? So he goes to his conference where he talks about his books. It's like an empty room. Nobody's really enthused to be there. There's like 5 people on the panel and 4 people in the crowd. And he turns to the other panelists and says, "Where are all the people?" And he says, "Well, they're probably in the room with Centaura Golden." And he says, "Who is Centaura Golden?" So then he goes into this large conference room and he sees this Black woman on stage talking about her book. And I believe her book is called Eyes, Bees in the Ghetto. Eyes, Bees in the Ghetto or something like that. It's absolutely packed. White people, Black people, all different shades. And the character is played by Issa Rae. So Centaura is Issa Rae. And she's talking about her book and she's saying, I tried really hard to, bring Black voices to life and stuff like that. And the speaker says, "Great, can you read some of your book?" And the book is just like, "Oh, I know." Oh God, it was so cringe. It was so cringe. She said something like, "What you doing? I was going to the pharmacy. Is you pregnant again?" "Yes, but this time Ray Ray gonna be a good father." And all the white people clap. Everybody stands up and clap.
yeah,
It was a pretty funny scene, and I felt like I was gonna hate Centaur through this movie, but I'm
yeah.
gonna be nice to her because later, she sort of reveals herself. But when you first see her, in my opinion, she gives off a very bad impression, like a grifter, like a person who's just a bad writer. I don't know. What did you think about that scene and everything?
Yeah, like there's also in that scene the interviewer also asks her like, tell us like how did you get into writing and things like that. And then we also find that she studied in a like very nice university, and like basically she's not from the ghetto. Like she had a decent life and all of those things, and she did like a very good internship and all of those things. So yeah, like when we first meet her, I thought like, yeah, maybe she did this as like a money grabber or something like that, just very using her Blackness as a, I don't know, create something that would sell, because
Hmm.
that's what woke people are into, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So yeah, you kind of get that feeling. But I like Issa Rae, so I didn't want to like hate her character, honestly.
Hmm.
So yeah, but I thought like, yeah, she was gonna be like the enemy.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, the interesting thing about AAV. Like African American English, like that sort of slang and stuff
Hmm.
like that, is that it does have a literary tradition and it does come from reality and some truth because there are Black people that do speak like that, right? And there are people that did speak like that in the past. And if we're going to tell our stories honestly, we do have to use that language. But the thing is, the creating Black art is so complex because we have to deal with being truthful to ourselves, but also being truthful under the gaze and under the watch of people who might despise us or might ridicule us or might use how we speak as a way to say that we are less intelligent, right? So it's so complex because we know that there are folks that talk that way, but using it in that big of a platform can be kind of embarrassing. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
if you're Black, your mother has definitely told you, don't act like that when the white folks around, or don't
Hmm.
act like that in mixed company, right? So it's such a complex thing because I'm sure when we see Monk walk into that room and he sees that this is what people like, he's kind of offended because why are you celebrating this when there are Black artists who are creating very complicated, deep, profound works? You get what
Hmm.
I'm saying?
It is very complicated because I mean, right when you just said it, I'm thinking about like, you know, as a white looking person, I don't really have to think about anyone else's views when I'm doing something or when I'm putting out something in the world. But uh, when Black people do put out arts or work into the world, they do have to also consider the white gaze as well, which is something that's just like difficult and
Mhm.
complex. Like, how are you going to live your life for two different like audiences?
Right, right, and that's the issue. And so, moving on in the story, Monk leaves that book conference and he goes to his mother's house. Right? No, no, sorry. He goes to a doctor's office to meet his sister, and his sister is played by Tracy Ellis Ross, and she's an abortion doctor. She works at Planned Parenthood, and she's kind of a cool character. She's funny. She's kind of smart. They're driving home from the clinic, and she tells a funny joke about Roe versus Wade.
Mm.
You have $600 pairs of shoes. You're trapped in the ocean, but your boat is going away. What's the joke? How is this a legal issue? Oh, get it? It's Roe versus Wade. Ha ha ha. Thought that was funny. And and she's going through a lot in her life because she recently got divorced. She's down on her luck. She started smoking again, which is bad for her health. And she's the only one in Boston taking care of the family's mother. Right, the father died many years ago from suicide, and she's the last one here in the family taking care of them. They show
Hmm.
up at the house, and the maid is there, and the maid is a woman whose name is I forgot her name. I forgot her name.
Okay.
Lorraine. Lorraine.
Oh
Lorraine.
yeah.
So they show up at the house, and there's a big, Black woman named Lorraine. And I thought Lorraine's character was interesting because she sort of speaks the way that Centaurus characters spoke in the book, which
Hmm.
I think backs up the point that I was saying earlier that there are Black people that use that sort of language
Hmm.
in their real life. Right now, her
Yeah.
English is not fully broken, but it's sort of similar, right?
I
And
mean,
so,
yeah, her behavior, like when she first sees Monk, she says like, "Oh, hi, Mr. Monk," and
mhm,
then Monk says like, "Oh, please call me Thelonious" or something like that, and she
mhm.
says like, "I can't remember new names," you know?
Right, right. She's kind of like a mammy character, like that,
Yeah.
that fat, happy black woman who's like a servant, right? And it goes to show sort of this classism that exists in Thelonious's world too, because he says, "I look fat." And Lorraine says, "No, you're an Arkansas 10. Like if you go down south, you be considered skinny." And then he
Hmm.
sees his mother, and his mother says, "You look fat, Theo." And I feel like they have like this very passive aggressive mother who's mean to them in like a condescending way, the same way a lot of like rich families are. Like this is just how I imagine like rich white wasps to act towards their kids. Like they always say some slick stuff to them to make them, feel down or something like that. Do you get what I'm saying?
Wow. I mean, I didn't feel like their whole family is just like passive aggressive and things, but it just made me think like, okay, their mother is the only one who's left. Their father died, so they're kind of like putting up with her, you know.
Hmm.
And he doesn't really like see his mother all the time, so he's just like there to be there,
Hmm.
like just to fulfill his like son duties.
Hmm.
And he's just sort of like putting up with his mother, and that was like that's what I got.
Right, right. I mean, what I got from that first interaction with her family is that, to a certain degree, Thelonious's life is a lot like, the white people who try to judge him. Right, he is of a family that's of a certain class. They're very successful. The whole family is doctors, very
Hmm.
educated, very wealthy people. Right, but the other black characters that come into the story, like Lorraine, like Maynard, they speak more in common black vernacular. Right, like
Hmm.
not broken English, but AAVE. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah,
So I do think there is some sort of disconnect, which is why I think Theo said something like, "I don't even believe in race," stuff like that,
yeah.
because maybe he sees his blackness as secondary to his status and social class and his education. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, maybe. And I mean, he doesn't really uses the class to, look down on those characters. He loves those characters too. Like he loves Lorraine. I think like he always says Lorraine is like family. He
Hmm.
loves Maynard too,
Hmm.
because I think like Maynard is someone from his childhood.
Hmm.
So yeah, like he doesn't necessarily look down on them, but
Hmm.
he does embraces them. But yeah, there I would say I would agree with you on the class thing.
Yeah, definitely. So moving forward, Theo's mom has like early onset dementia or Alzheimer's or something like that. She often forgets things. For example, we find out that the sister is divorced, but the mother doesn't remember that the sister is divorced because she asks, "Is your husband going to join us for dinner?" And he's like, "We're separated, mom," and stuff like that. And
Hmm.
so she continues to have mental decline throughout the movie. But I watched the movie a second time, and I don't believe she had Alzheimer's or dementia. She just wanted to like passive aggressively like throw shots at her kids. That's why she was saying
What?
like, that's why she said, "Is your husband coming?" Oh, that's what she says to her son. "I knew you weren't gay." Like she just wanted to, throw shade. She's a shady
Wow.
character.
I do believe that she had like Alzheimer's because we saw her like showing symptoms like going in the middle of the night trying to like save her daughter and like leaving the bath water on and things like that. So I don't think that theory is true.
Right, right, right. Well, moving on, moving on. They go to dinner, all of them together, and they have a nice time. And then I believe the next scene is that Monk is at a bookstore and he's looking for his own books. And so he asked the guy who's working at the store, "Hey, have you heard of this author? His name is Thelonious Monk or Thelonious Ellison or something like that." And the guy says, "Oh, right this way." And he takes Monk to the African American book section, right? And Monk is pissed because like my books are not black books. I am a black author, but that doesn't make me a black author, if that makes sense. And the only thing black about these books are the ink it's printed on, right? And he then moves his books to the other section, and I believe this was a snapping point for him. Like this is when he was like,
Hmm.
"Oh, he might give up on writing." I didn't know where the movie was going from here, but I thought he might give up on writing or do something else. I didn't know. But yeah, what did you think of that scene?
I mean, that scene was funny because, yeah, like if you think about it, maybe that is true. Like maybe in the bookstores, I would assume specifically in the States or the UK or something like places where there are like bigger Black populations,
Hmm.
they get like classified under African American or British American, whatever, even though they are not like their content of the book has nothing to do with blackness.
Hmm.
Maybe they don't even have black characters in them, because white people can do that, right? White
Hmm.
people can have a book or a movie that has all black cast or whatever and can
Hmm.
tell black stories, but they don't really specifically get classified under that.
Hmm.
So that just show like the sort of dumbness of the industry, I guess, and
Hmm.
also like systematic like racism of the industry.
Hmm.
But the scene was just funny in itself, like this guy fighting the clerk of the store because he's just a worker there.
Right, right, right. Now, the thing is, we don't know exactly any of these stories that Theo wrote about, right? They just say he's a talented writer, his work is great and stuff like that, but we don't know the stories. And I do think it is possible for Black creators to make Black art that's not about Black life, right? Like
Hmm.
your work doesn't inherently have to be about us or what it means to be Black. But I do think maybe there might be some dissonance, and I'm just going to throw this theory out there. I'm going to throw this theory that maybe Theo's books are Black, but he just doesn't realize it. He might think he's writing a great, American novel that's raceless, but he might not be able to see that the content he does create actually is very Black. Does that make sense?
Okay. I mean, that makes sense, of course. Like, I just don't see him like not realizing that
Mm,
because he is very educated on these issues. You know, he's a professor.
mhm.
So I don't know if that would be the case
Right.
when it comes to your theory.
Right. I would argue that even if the characters that were in his book were all whites or there were no black characters in there, it could still be a black story because it could be related to black life. Let's say you told the story of like Cecil Rhodes, the white man who colonized Africa. That's
Hmm.
a black story. That's a
Yes, of
black.
course. But at the same time, like his books might have black characters, but it might not be about being black.
That's true.
So
It might
yeah.
not be about being black, but then again, what is being black? That's the big question. So the story is about a bunch of black kids who go to a summer camp in the woods of Iowa. Now, is that a black story?
No, it's a story
It's a story.
about kids.
But if
Like
it,
it doesn't necessarily have like it doesn't have to. When I say like a black story, I'm thinking like it doesn't necessarily have to highlight the issues that black people go through.
Mhm,
It can be there as a side story or something like that, but it doesn't need to be about racism or anything like that.
or
Like
the
for
or the
example, the Tracy Ellis Ross like series. What
mhm.
was the series that she
Girlfriends.
Girlfriends? Like Girlfriend is not necessarily about black issues. It's like a sitcom of like four girlfriends.
hmm Okay, you might say that, but
And
what if the person is specifically looking for? I want a show like Sex and the City, but I want to see it from Black women's perspectives. So then, of course, oh, Girlfriends is going to pop up. Oh, Living Single is going to pop up. Those would be black shows because they're centered around black characters. And while not every issue is about race or hair texture or what it's like to be black, they are fitting a certain category of what people want to see.
yeah, but you cannot like distinguish. You cannot have like a black character and erase all of the blackness from it, and then that would be like a story character.
hmm
Because just by being black, you're gonna have some additional elements to your story, like hair texture or I don't know, racism or whatever.
hmm
So, but that doesn't define like the general topic of the story, is what I meant.
Right, but a story can be many things at once, right? It
Hmm.
could be a comedy, it could be a drama, it could also be a black story, it could be an examining of the human experience, right? And I would say if there is a story like that Theo wrote about a bunch of kids who happen to be black going on a camping trip in the woods, that is to some degree a black story
Yes, to
because
some degree, but that wasn't the point that the author or the director was trying to get across.
but think about the audience too, and this is another thing I think Theo's problem is. It sounds like I'm attacking Theo, but I'm just trying to give this movie a different take because it's so easy just to sympathize with Theo and bash on the people that the movie wants us to bash on. But I really want to critique the ideas because Theo asked many powerful questions. I would
Hmm.
say, right? That Theo's thing might be he has a disconnect with his audience. He might be writing very black stories. He might be the greatest Black American author that doesn't realize he's a Black American author and he has to tell black stories whether he wants to or not because that's what's going to come out of him. Does that make sense? So Theo might say this is not a black story, but it comes out that way, and people who want that type of story need to be able to find it. So
Okay.
of course it's going to be put in the African American literature section. I would say. You get what I'm saying?
Okay. Okay. I mean, I don't necessarily agree. I do think yes, there could be black elements in the story, but just because there's a black person in the story doesn't mean you have to put it under African American studies,
Of course not.
because
Of
that's
course.
what the section read, like African American studies, and for all we know, his book might be about a little Mexican girl. You know.
You're right. You're right. You're right. No, I'll take it on face value. What the movie says. Theo or Monk writes books that are raceless, and because he is a black man, they still put him in the black lit section. Right?
Hmm.
I can take that. I'll take that. I want to take a step back here because there was a scene that was interesting. Two scenes that were interesting. Monk finds out that his deceased father used to cheat on his wife a lot, cheat on their mother. This was during the meeting with his sister during dinner, and he never knew about it. And we get the feeling, and we get more information throughout the movie, that Monk was one of the only people in the family who had a good relationship with his father. And also, other people in the family sort of like bashed their father. They say he was always angry or bored. He was a cheating man. He was a man who was always working, always busy, but never happy, and that sort of stuff.
Hmm.
And later on that night, after that dinner, Monk is watching TV, and he's watching like stereotypical black television, right? Like a bunch of guys in the kitchen cooking crack, and the guy saying, "Don't love nobody, nigga. Kill your enemies, nigga. Fuck these hoes, nigga." And then he turns off the TV and that sort of stuff. What did you think about those two scenes and the revelations about Monk's father?
I just really liked the fact that they talked about his father and it didn't feel corny or cheesy like, oh, black families have to have a dysfunctional father. It didn't feel like that because most family members already knew and they kind of accepted him that way and they kind of resented him that way. And it was more about like Monk's, like, it was more about how his father's stuff affected like his current life now, like his psychology a little
Mm-hmm.
bit. It was more like that and not like in its stereotypical like way. And I
Mm-hmm.
really like that because that's what the whole movie was defending. So I was like curious about that, and I like that it came up a couple of times, but it wasn't like the highlight of the movie.
Yeah, yeah.
And when it comes to that, like the movie scene where he's watching that movie, that was just funny. And
Mm-hmm.
from there, like you can just see that he is annoyed by these stereotypes,
Mm-hmm.
and he doesn't want to like appreciate them,
Mm-hmm.
or not appreciate, or just like he doesn't want to allow these sort of narratives to go around. And that's what I
Mm-hmm.
got.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. I think also the scene when he was watching the gangsters on TV, he was showing how like even if you don't want to, you are forced to bring into your body these negative black stereotypes or just these certain types of black stories, right? Because I don't think Monk seriously wanted to watch a gangster movie late at night with black characters, but because in this mass media world, that's the primary thing that they try to put out about our people, right? So that's how he was able to write the book that he would write later in the story, and I think that's how. I also think the situation with his father influenced the story that we saw. We only got to see a bit of the book that he would write later, but I do think the father son dynamic that he has with his father and the conflicts he has in his mind about his father influenced the story that he wrote. Does that make
Hmm.
sense?
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, I think it was also like another little great conversation starter, like that scene with the movie, because we can see sort of like, with today's media, it's changing a little bit, like with movies like this,
Hmm.
but specifically like earlier, like Hollywood movies or, I would say even up until like 2010s,
Hmm.
media sort of like continue to stereotype certain races.
Hmm.
It's specifically if we're talking about like American media, then it's like black people, they kept on being stereotyped.
Hmm.
And the worst part was that those stories, even though they might be true and they might be influential, they might be educational, we can't control who sees it and who understands what from it. And everyone sees it. Like a kid in Pakistan sees it and thinks a certain way, a kid in China sees it and thinks a certain way. And there's that sort of like mass effect of the media.
You know what you just described?
What?
Jasper Noah films.
Okay, I'm not arguing with you on this.
You just described climax.
Okay.
anyway, anyway, so moving on. Monk and his sister are having like brunch at some cafe when she suffers a massive heart attack, and she eventually dies at the hospital. And it's a very sad scene, and it's unexpected because she died so quickly. They then shoot to the scene on the beach where the family has her ashes in an urn, and Monk is reading her last words, and she's saying some funny jokes like, "If you're reading this, I'm dead, and hopefully I died under a sweaty Idris Elba during sex." And if that wasn't good enough, maybe I died under Russell Crowe during sex, which was funny.
Yeah.
It was a great letter. I said I got to write something like that when I die. And they're throwing out the ashes, and some one of the neighbors, like some white guy named Willis or something, shows up and says, "Do you have a permit for that? You have a permit to throw away ashes?" And Cliff says, "Willis, get out of here before I smack your face off," or something like that. What did you think about the sister's death scene and how that changed things in the family?
Yeah, I mean, that was definitely like I would say the most dramatic scene in the movie, because we see Monk actually seeing her sister like die a little bit because he's seeing her feet and her feet are like shaking, and after like 1 second, her feet are like not moving anymore, and we see the moment where she actually like literally dies, and he sees that, and that's like a also very sort of a trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And he's just like speechless. And yeah, the funeral scene, it was like really funny. We can sort of see like she was a woman who could find joys in life, and she could like look, you know even with death she can find like some happiness and some humor in it,
Mm-hmm.
which was like pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and then like we see of course like the I don't know, that some white guy just being a Karen. And I like that once again they don't make a big deal about it, they just like shoo him off. And yeah.
Yeah, yeah. By the way, I have to say, throughout this movie, it has a very, northeastern American old money aesthetic, and I have to say, I'm a sucker for that because I just love that whole vibe and look. Sweaters tied around the neck.
The nautical theme.
Yeah, the nautical themes, boat shoes. I just love that whole northeastern Boston old money rich vibe. I just love it, and I love seeing it imposed on black people too, like black people with like summer homes in Nantucket. Like, what the fuck? I love that. I love that whole vibe. I'm a sucker for that. So that's
Yeah.
there's a lot of that in this movie. It's a very Boston, New England movie, and I think that's probably why a lot of critics like this movie too, because they're like, oh, black people wear tweed belts too.
Wow.
Oh, they drink white wine too. But anyway, moving on. After the funeral, everybody goes inside. Cliff, Monk's brother, gives the maid Lorraine and his mother like some opiates to make them pass out to go to sleep. And Monk and Cliff have like a talk, and there seems to be a lot of tension there. Cliff recently got divorced because his wife found him in bed with another man, and he is forced to live in Arizona, far away from the Northeast. And he is, in a very conservative place where there aren't a lot of gay people. And he recently came out, and his life is sort of in shambles. He's like doing a lot of drugs and stuff like that. And you know, Cliff has a lot of animosity towards his father, who passed away, but Monk has a more favorable view, and that I think is a big reason why Cliff sort of is antagonistic to Monk and also his mother as well, because he really probably hated his father because his father was homophobic. What did you think about Cliff? Really breaking down who he was at that scene.
I mean, once again, I do love Cliff's character because I think he's just like hilarious, like the things he say. And he was just like very honest because this is the scene where like Monk questions like, why was I the last one to learn that Dad was cheating? And then Cliff says like, because you were the only one who like loved him and you didn't see past like through that. And yeah, I I think there, yes, there is a lot of conflicts within Cliff, but he's trying to like, he's not giving up and he's trying to like live through it. And I think he's also trying to make up for the lost time. I think he also says that too in the movie. And that's why like he's sort of going crazy with drugs and lovers and all of those things.
Hmm.
And yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I thought.
Yeah, I thought Cliff is divorced dad energy incarnate, but gay version, right? Like divorced dad swag is never cool. Like a dad gets divorced, he becomes Kanye usually if he's straight. But when you're a gay divorced dad, oh, life turns up. Life's a party. Life's a Madonna video. Life is
Wow.
life is absolutely lit. Because I like Cliff's swag, but I didn't like how he was with his family and stuff. Because you know what, he said he didn't have money to like take care of his mom and help put her in a retirement home now that she has Alzheimer's. But then we see him later like doing coke with Latina twinks. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. Yeah, that
so,
kind of annoyed me too. I was thinking, you're spending all this money on coke and you can't, send money for your mother.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And so Cliff leaves and goes back to Tucson. And as he's driving away, Monk meets a girl across the street. Her name is Coraline, right? She comes up to him and no, no, actually, he sees this girl drop her tomatoes like on the ground or something like that, right? Yeah. So he goes up and tries to help her. And as he's helping her, he takes her stuff inside and they start talking and stuff like that. She says that she actually read one of his books and that she actually likes his writing and that he's a good writer and stuff like that. And she's a lawyer, and they have an interesting back and forth. He asks her, "Why do you, what does it feel like to defend guilty people?" And she says she loves it, and she says it gives me the ability not to judge people, right?
Hmm.
And she says it's similar to you as an author, right? You can't judge your characters because you can't hate them for every little mistake they do. Which I think resonated with Monk because I think he does do that. Maybe he doesn't do that with his characters, but he judges the audience and he judges writers and stuff like that. What did you think of that scene with Coraline?
Yeah, I mean, I really liked her, and I think maybe one of the reasons why I liked her is I do kind of resonate with her ideas when it comes to like viewing people, because I think her idea is like, people are not like necessarily most people are not necessarily bad, but they do have like bad days or bad phases, which makes them do bad things. If we can't be defined by every bad decision that we have or every bad thing that we do, and we should give people to understand their mistakes, apologize for their mistakes, and make up for their mistakes.
Hmm.
And I think that's really important, and that's also something that I try to think as a like as a future psychologist, because probably I'll have patients that do fucked up things, and I have to be able to embrace them, I have to be able to accept them.
Hmm.
So maybe that's why I really like her character as well, because I just like share the same ideas with her.
Right, right, right.
So I think she was pretty cool, and I also think why like Monk really liked her, because Monk doesn't seem like the person that would just like date any girl.
Mm.
He feels picky. He wants to have that intellectual or understanding like conversation, and he wouldn't just go out with Cali girls, or since he lives in Hollywood.
Yeah.
So I think that's why he liked her. Like she was able to think critically. She was able to like talk about deep things and express her ideas without like being afraid.
Okay, okay. I have a funny question. FMK, Arthur, Monk, Cliff. Go.
Wait, who was Arthur?
Arthur is the publisher.
What?
Fuck Mary Kill. Arthur,
Oh,
the publisher, the guy that works for Monk to get his books done. Cliff, the brother, or Monk himself.
mm. I would probably marry Monk
Hmm.
and F Cliff, and then sorry, kill Arthur.
Oh wow, I did not expect that. Okay. Anyway, moving forward, I do think Coraline was a great addition, and I wish that she sort of stayed in Monk's life to sort of balance him out and sort of bring him down to earth. Because as a writer, he can sort of get lost in his own head and be too
Hmm.
judgmental and stuff like that. So moving forward in the story. After he meets Coraline, they start dating and stuff like that. He takes his mother to the doctor. The doctor confirms that she has Alzheimer's and that something has to be done. Cliff, has very little money. Like it costs thousands of dollars per month to put somebody in a retirement home, showing how great the United States of America is. And so, down on his luck, out of money, the university is not paying him while he's not at work. He starts writing this book, and the book is called My Pathology.
Yeah, and also before that, like Arthur calls him and he says something like, you're a great author, but nobody's really interested in your book, so maybe you should write something more black.
Yeah.
And they kind of have this little argument where he says like, I'm not gonna do that, I don't want to do that. And
Mm.
then yeah, like you said, he just sort of like says, let me give this a shot.
Yeah. So it's late at night. He's like at home drinking and stuff like that, and he starts pounding it out. And it's titled "My Pathology," not path with a th, path with an f. And as he's writing the story comes alive in front of him. There's two actors there, and one of them is a very, very famous black actor. I forgot
Yeah,
his name.
I think Keith, I want to say.
Yeah, yeah, Keith David. Keith
Yeah.
David. He is a legend. Legend. Keith David, all star. 10 stars. He should be much more famous than he is. But either way, Keith David is there along with some guy who looks like 50 Cent, but a broke 50 Cent. And yeah, he starts writing the story, and the guy is wearing a do rag and and an eye patch, holding a gun, looking out the window, waiting for the police to come. Keith David's character comes in and says, "What you doing there, boy?" He's like drunk, has a pot belly, and they start going back and forth and having this very stupid sort of like how can I say this typical stereotypical argument. You wasn't there for me, man. And then Keith David says, "Oh, your mother wasn't shit," and shit like that. And he eventually like shoots him. Yeah, the young guy shoots his own father. What did you think of that scene? While Monk is writing the story.
Mm. I thought that was such a fun way to like show the process of writing, or like just to see like how he was creating his story. That was like so much fun, and he like you could feel sort of how he was feeling towards the story because he was sort of trolling like himself, and he was just like making the most stereotypical, most like just in your face to a point where it's funny sort of
Hmm.
like scenarios, and that was just a fun scene to watch.
I definitely think when he was writing that, he was working through the ideas in his head or the feelings he had towards his father. So, like the young guy who's holding the gun, that's Monk putting himself in that shoe, right? And his father is the old drunk man, or maybe he's telling the story of Cliff, how Cliff feels towards his father. That's how I'm interpreting that
Yeah.
scene right there. What do you think?
Yeah, that might be because since he had a good relationship with his father, maybe that was like him facing his father now, if
Hmm.
he were alive
Hmm.
or something like that. But yeah, that was definitely fun.
Yeah, possibly like confronting his father and like hiding so many things from him because Monk probably saw his father as like a god, but behind all of that, he was cheating on his mom, being abusive to the other kids, and he didn't
Hmm.
know because he was too young.
Yeah.
Definitely. Very excellent scene. And I actually would want to read that book. Does that make me bad?
No, it does not make you bad. I feel like you could have like I don't want this review to be like let's erase all the movies that are stereotypically black,
Hmm.
because like no, let's not do that because some of those stories are actually really fun or really true or really dramatic, whatever. So that's not the point, but I guess the point is to have like different you know uh, sort of black stories there too that
Hmm.
are like just more stereotypically average.
Hmm. Right. I mean, we went this far talking about this movie without talking about its grandfather, Hollywood Shuffle, the 1980s Robert Townsend movie. And that's very important to talk about. Like, Hollywood Shuffle was this movie where he was breaking down all the stereotypes in Hollywood. And it was about this young black actor who didn't want to play a slave, didn't want to play a pimp, didn't want to play a gangster, those roles. And so eventually he falls into that trap and says, you know what, I'm going to do it. I'm going to just go for it. And he gets the role. And yeah, it reinforces all of those bad ideas that, black actors have to be put into this box to be successful. And this is just that same story, but put into the literary world. You get what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah, definitely. And like yeah, reading about it, we did find out that the director of this movie, the writer of this movie, was inspired by a Hollywood Shuffle as well, and they actually met. The director of Hollywood Shuffle and this movie's director, they met and they had like a Q&A and a conversation, and yeah.
Now we watched Hollywood Shuffle, and we did that about 3 months ago. I would say I really enjoyed that movie. I thought it was very funny, very important. It still resonates to this day. What did you think about Hollywood Shuffle when we watched it?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely had similar vibes to this. It was like sarcastic, dark humor. It's funny, but it's also like it makes you think. It asks, really good questions about black people in society and how they're perceived, or also like how at some points they're sort of forced to do some things that are not like within their principles, just to be in a position where they can have some influence.
Yeah, there are some parts of Hollywood Shuffle that are great, like the scene where he's like, "Call 1-800 Negro for Black Actor School," and you can learn how to play a slave, a
Yeah.
pimp, a gangster. That was great. But then there were other parts of the movie I was like, "This is horrible." Like the Hood movie reviews, like they recreated movies and then they had
Yeah.
people as, like reviewing them. I thought that was kind of cringe. But I do think Hollywood Shuffle is an important movie, even if it doesn't hold up well today. That's my take on it.
I think it's still like fun to watch, I would
Yeah,
say, because I enjoyed it and I watched it like 3 months ago for the first time.
yeah.
So yeah, I think it's still like holds up. The sad part, and I guess the good part, both, is that those questions that are or those themes that are questioned in the movie still exist today to some degree.
Hmm.
So I think that's why it would be like important to watch it.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. But moving on, I have to say, well, we'll talk about that later. We'll talk about that later because this is an important point. So he writes the book. He finishes My Pathology. We don't know the exact time because time in this movie moves very fast. Like people write books fast, people read books fast. So maybe this movie takes place over like a 6 month span or a year. But
Hmm.
either way, the next scene is Monk has finished the book. He gets a call from his publisher, Arthur, and Arthur is reading the book. He's like, "Light me up, motherfucker! Tell them cops suck my dick," and shit like that. And Monk is like, "You like it?" And Arthur is like, "What the hell is this?" And Monk is like, "You told me to write something black. It's got everything in it. It's got drugs. It's got gangs. It's got crack cocaine. It's got rappers." And Arthur is like, "You can't be serious. This isn't what I was talking about." And Monk is like, "Send it to the publisher. Send it out. Let's just do it." And Arthur's like, "Is this a joke? Do you want me to send it as a joke?" He said, "No, send it straight." And Arthur is scared at first because he says this, and I think this is an important scene. He said, "White people say they want the truth, but what they really want is absolution, meaning that they don't want to feel guilty about anything. They just want to be able to enjoy art and enjoy it for what it is or whatever, right?" And I thought that
Hmm.
was one of the most powerful scenes and most important quotes in the movie. But what did you think about it when Arthur got the text?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I also want to add that when Monk writes the story, he writes it under the name Stag R. Lee. So he doesn't really put it under his name. But anyway, going back to what you just described, yes, I do think that is true. specifically since this movie is some sort of like critique of like that woke white woke people, and I think that is true when it comes to like white woke people, and also like all white people, I would say, because that is sort of like the human nature of not wanting to feel guilty or release your guilt or whatever. But there should be healthier alternatives where we don't you know create other stereotypes of black people, when at the same time just like accepting certain things that happen throughout the history.
Hmm.
There
Yeah,
needs to be like not releasing guilt but more of an acceptance.
I mean, that's a good point, right? Like most Americans don't want to read true American history. You don't want to read about all the governments we overthrown and all the innocent people we bombed and stuff like that. It's just human nature not wanting to feel guilty. So,
Yeah,
like you
it's
say,
true
yeah.
for Turkish people too. Like most Turkish people don't want to recognize Armenian genocide.
Hmm.
But what good does that do? Like just because saying it wasn't a genocide, that's just trying to like take the short way of not feeling guilty.
Right, exactly. Instead of dealing with things as they are. But then also, there's another part of it, just basic human nature. People want simple stories. And I guess the book that he wrote, My Pathology, was more of a simple story and easier to digest because he wrote it as a joke rather than something serious like his other work, right? And we've heard this story so many times. Like, how many times have you heard about an artist who made the biggest song and he said, "Oh, yeah, I made that in 5 minutes," right?
Yeah.
Like, it's such a common thing in art. You know, the song you work on the most is the one that gets the least play. The joke song blows up. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, definitely. But I also like another reason maybe why this book became like so popular in the movie is that also it's something that it's a story that was expected to be told, so it's easier to digest.
Hmm. Hmm. Right. People like what's familiar. That's why Hollywood is remaking King Kong and Godzilla and Spider-Man every 5 years, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah. Moving on in the story. What happens next? What happens next?
I Let's see.
I
Okay,
think.
so
Go ahead. Go ahead.
yeah, the isn't this the part where like yeah we see sort of like Monk still dating Caroline and things like that, and they have dinners with his mom and stuff. Then like the author, not the author, Arthur calls back,
Right.
right?
Right. 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 Yeah, so basically, Monk is having more dates with Coraline. They're getting closer together. He takes her to meet his mom, and the mom says, "I'm glad you're not white." And Coraline says, "I'm glad too." I thought that was a funny line. And he also comes home, and the lights are off in his mother's house, and the bills are not being paid because his sister is dead. So his mother's not being taken care of. He calls Cliff. Cliff doesn't want to give any money, and so yeah, the money situation is becoming more and more tight for Monk in this situation. But then light comes at the end of the tunnel. Arthur calls and says the publisher wants to publish My Pathology, and they want to give you $750,000 for it or something like that. And that's a lot of money. That's a lot of money for him. That's more than he's ever gotten, and he's getting publishing from the biggest publishers that usually passed on him. And he's
Yeah.
pissed off. Monk is like, how do they want to publish this trash? And then Arthur pulls out 3 bottles of Johnny Walker Red, Johnny Walker Black, and Johnny Walker Blue. And he says, listen, the red is shit, the black is a little less shit, but the blue is the best. It's all made by the same company, but people don't buy the blue because the blue is expensive and it's complex and it's hard to get, right? So people just drink the red. And he tells him, you just wrote a red book. You wrote your first Johnny Walker Red book. What did you think about that whole scene?
I mean, I know I can understand now why he does his job really good, and he's like this author. I don't know what is his profession is called.
I think he's his agent. I think
Agent, yes,
that's the
yes.
best way to break it down.
So I can truly understand why he is good at his job, because that was such a good marketing, like such a good sales pitch. Nobody could say no to that. And also we know that like Monk needs the money, and if you compare yourself to whiskey, then maybe it's not so bad.
Right. Right. And
But
yeah, what do you think about the idea about artists making bad art sometimes just to sell? Like, do you ever feel like your favorite artist, Beyonce, ever made a trash song just to sell?
of course,
Give
I
an
mean,
example.
give an example. Single Ladies.
Single Ladies is a bad song. What's wrong with you?
It's not a bad song. It's not a bad song, but I do think it was sort of like a demand song.
Hmm. Just meant for pop.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Or yeah, like Girls Who Run the World, like that
Hmm.
song. I love those songs, and I did listen to those songs like millions of times.
Uh-huh.
But I can't deny that, yeah, they do have like a certain appeal to certain audiences, which would make them anthems,
Hmm.
in a sense, and that would sell.
Hmm.
So I think a lot of like the art that we have right now is, together with some sort of like marketing idea.
Hmm.
Even
Definitely.
even if not in creation, then until to the point where they put it out, that marketing idea kind of becomes a part of that art, I
Right,
would say.
right. You
Uh,
know, it
yeah,
gets complex because there are certain artists that make very high level art, like Kendrick Lamar. His art is like Leonardo da Vinci level, but in rap form, right? And then you're like, okay, that's one guy, but then you compare it to all the other rappers and stuff. A lot of their stuff is trash. They're purposely making it to go pop or be as palatable as possible. So it's like with writing books, you would think everybody would try to be Kendrick Lamar. You know what I mean? Like
hmm
you want to try to make a great book that will be taught in schools or people will remember and stuff like that. But in reality, People just want to read stupid stuff. They want to read "I Be in the Ghetto."
I mean, I think both can be possible because the thing about like selling books is also that also means that it will be read by a lot of people, and so that kind of like selling a lot of books just to sell them also comes with some sort of recognition
Hmm.
as well in whatever you do. And maybe yes, we're not going to talk about it in within 100 years. Like after 100 years, nobody's going to remember the book, but it's just going to be the bestseller for like a good year, and you're going to make a lot of money. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Hmm.
But it does come with its like cons.
Right, right. One thing I have to say about the movie in general is that I feel like the movie is telling the story of this man and his struggles in the writing world, but there has to be a bigger conversation had about the general public doesn't read, right? To be a New York Times bestseller, you only have to sell around 2,000 books. In a country of 400 million people, you can have the number one book in the country if you only sell 2,000 copies, right?
Mm,
That's insane to think about.
yeah,
And so I wish the movie gave an indictment on like American society. And listen, I'm not the biggest reader. I started a book last year and I didn't finish it, right? I read a
yeah.
lot of like the news and stuff like that, but I haven't read a book in a while. So I'm not going to make myself seem better than anybody else at all. And reading by itself does not make you better because you can read and still be a dumbass. But
Yeah,
I wish the movie said, people might want to just read this trash because people barely read it all. It's a miracle to get somebody to buy a book, let alone read it. You get what I'm
I
saying?
mean, I think we kind of see that when towards the end, automatically, like the first week of the book, they want to make a movie. So we kind of see that a little bit, like that
Right.
critique, I would say, but
Mhm.
not in depth. And
Right.
also, like one thing I just want to say about the character in that scene, when Monk learns that they want to buy this book, he totally separates Stag's character and his character. So in his mind, Stag and the person who wrote My Pathology is definitely like different people.
Hmm.
But everybody else in the movie kind of relates the two, even though they are two different people.
That's
Like
very
his
deep.
girlfriend reads both books and likes both books because in reality they're written by the same people, same person,
Exactly.
right?
Well, also in reality, people are complex. You like Little Nas X, and you also like Kendrick Lamar. You like, a complex Gaspar Noah film, and you also like the Marvel MCU. You get what
Yeah,
I'm saying? So people can like both, and that's what I think the writer Monk didn't really want to grasp, or didn't know how to wrestle with, or the film didn't wrestle with this idea that people that read probably read a lot of different stuff, and on top of that, the people that do read are very small. And pop books are very different than the major, literary masterworks of today. You get what
yeah,
I'm saying?
yeah. And I don't know, that was just like a little conflict, not little, actually, very big conflict that he had within itself, that he didn't really want to relate to this like stereotypical black person within himself, because there are stereotypical people within ourselves. Like as a Turkish person, as much as I don't relate to my country that much, yes, I do still love that very stereotypical like Turkish things, or I have those characteristics of Turkish moms or women, that I constantly want to feed you and things like that. And those are not two separate people within me. And I think that's what Monk was struggling
Yeah,
with.
as a black American married to a atypical Turkish girl who is very different than the norm, I would say that yes, she still has a lot of Turkish stereotypes. There are
Yeah.
pickles in the fridge right now. Yogurt must constantly be bought, and we have all sorts of things hidden away in the kitchen that I do not know what the hell they are. And so yeah, definitely, definitely.
But yeah, I think that's also like even you struggle with that sometimes, I would say.
No, because I believe people are complex, and you could categorize me as a stereotypical black male on certain days, at certain times, at certain moments, and then at other times, I'm different, right?
Yeah, I
Because
mean
I'm a whole person.
you're certainly better at embracing those two sides of you, or more sides of you, because there's not just the two.
Mhm.
Than Monk, I would say. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Moving forward in the story, where were we? So Monk gets the call that his book wants to get published. He's on the phone with the publisher, this woke white woman, and she says, "Is this the author?" And he says, "He is I," or something like that, some complex sentence. And she says, "Excuse me." And then author has to tell him to increase his black scent, right? Which is interesting because in most other movies, like in the movie. Sorry for bothering you. Black people get ahead by pretending to be white on the phone, but in
Yeah.
this case, this entire movie, he has to increase his blackness or stereotypical blackness to get ahead. So he then says, "Yeah, that's me, motherfucker. I wrote that book. Can some bitch ass college boy write this book? Nah," stuff like that. And I really thought that was cool. That was interesting. And
Yeah.
yeah, you want to jump on that?
Yeah, that was just like a very, like you said, it was interesting that this time he had to increase his blackness
Hmm.
to sell something.
Yeah, yeah. Moving forward in the story, Monk goes back to his mother's house, and as he's unpacking bags and stuff like that, the cop comes, and the cop is an old black man named Maynard, and Maynard is, like a salt of the earth type of guy. You know what I mean? He's like, "What's up, Monk? They still call you Monk? I like your name, Thelonious. Thelonious, that's a good name now." And then he says, "You ever write for that show, NCIS?" I love that show. You should write for them. It's very popular. And Monk is like, I'll think about it. And then big booty Lorraine comes outside, and
Wow.
Maynard gets a hard on. The hearts start popping out of his eyes as soon as he sees big old thick Lorraine come outside. He says, Lorraine, you look good, girl. And she says, hey, Maynard. And yeah, they're so horny. The sexual tension just shoots through this movie. It goes to 10 very, very quickly. And as Maynard is walking away, he's shaking his head, Lorraine. And I know for a fact he used to hit that in the back of the police car. He used to tear that ass up.
Yeah, their whole relationship was just so cute. It was like, in Turkish we call it like the second spring.
Hmm.
So this is like, the when you fall in love, like when you're older, basically.
Hmm.
And yeah, they were just like so wholesome and so cute.
Hmm. Very, very much so. Very much so. We need that second movie, the Maynard and Lorraine story. And they love that book. Fuck, they love my pathology. They love that book. That Stag Arlie, he sure know how to write. Anyway, moving forward in the story, Coraline keeps on coming over for dinner. They continue dating. They have they start making out, having sex and stuff like that. There's a weird line that Monk says. He says, "My mom likes you because you remind us of our sister, right? The one who passed away. You're funny, you're smart, and you're a great kisser." And I thought that was really strange.
It was a joke, Simon.
I don't know. It was just a weird joke. Anyway, anyway, the mother walks out on the beach and because her memory is lost and she starts hallucinating, imagining that her daughter is back alive and stuff like that. So then they end up taking her to the nursing home, and she doesn't like it at all. She really hates it. Monk gets on the phone back with Arthur and says, he's gonna, accept publishing the book and stuff like that. He also gets another call from one of the guys who runs like a book club, the Literary Award Foundation, and they want Monk to be on the board, deciding which books are going to be the winners of the award. What did you think of everything in that movie up to that point?
Yeah, the conversation with the literary awards guy, it was
Hmm.
funny because the guy was just like straight up and he was like, okay, look, we need some black people in the board because we need diversity apparently.
Mm.
So that's why I called you. So
Hmm.
would you do it? And
Hmm.
Monk first says like, no, I don't want to be in this like crap and I don't have time also. And then like he says, oh, but you if you take this like board job, then you can judge other people's book. And he gets intrigued. Monk is now like intrigued and he says yes,
Yeah.
basically, which is like, which kind of also shows that even though he wrote the book that he wants to criticize the most, right? He still
Mhm.
wants to, he's not given up on the idea that, we shouldn't always stereotype black people. And I
Mhm.
think that's why he said yes. He wanted to still make something like he wanted to make a statement or something.
Right, right. I took that a little differently. I think Monk just really likes judging other people.
That too, yeah.
And Monk is a weird guy because throughout the movie, I didn't hate him. And I have to say, like the guy who played him, Jeffrey Wright, made Monk likable and unlikable at different times. But I would say 90% likable.
Yeah.
He's not that type of guy. You're like, oh, this dickhead, this douche. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
definitely, he wanted to do that because he wants to feel smarter than other people and bring some lights back to whatever. Anyway, he gets another call from Arthur, and Arthur says, there's a guy who wants to make a movie out of your book. His name is Wiley. You have to go meet him. You have to meet him in person. He doesn't want to do it on the phone. He wants to know you're the real deal. By the way, they told everybody that the writer of the book, My Pathology, is actually an escaped fugitive from the law and who has to hide his identity that way. So Monk goes to meet the guy, and he's trying to act very, stereotypically black. He's, walking with a limp, hunches his shoulders over, speaks with a deeper voice, all that sort of stuff. Takes off his glasses. He sits down at this fancy restaurant with this tall, skinny white guy who's like the director, and he says, "What's up, brother?" and gives him like a white man handshake. And he says, "What you drinking?" And he says, "Charon Blanc, your driest." And so he breaks the character a bit. And Wiley is like, "Oh, I've never seen a convict drink white wine." And they start talking some more. And Wiley actually went to prison for drug trafficking. And Monk actually runs out of the meeting when he hears sirens because he thinks his mother is sick and his mother got taken away in the hospital. And so he runs back to Arthur and his mother is there. And Wiley calls back and says, "Give him $4 million. We want the movie. We want the movie." What did you think of that scene?
Yeah, that was just pretty funny. Like, just again, two sides of the story. So Monk runs out of the meeting because he thinks his mother is dying, and the other guy assumes that he ran out because he's a fugitive, as he knows, and he was scared of the police.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
So that was just like funny in itself, and I thought that was just like hilarious. And also there was that scene. I don't know if this was like the next one or previously, but they have like another conversation with the publishers,
mm-hmm.
and the publishers were like I don't know, discussing some things, and Monk is sort of like had it, and he does not want to publish the book, and he thinks like this is just all being ridiculous, and then he says just to like make them quit publishing the book, he says, I'm gonna rename the book and I'm gonna call it Fuck. And and the publishers are like, oh no, we think my pathology is great, but okay, like don't make any rush decisions, let's talk. And they talk separately, And Arthur gets mad at Monk for like trying to do something like this because they're going to make a lot of money from it. And then the publishers come back to the phone and they say, okay, let's call it fuck, we think that's so brave and just like in your face, we love it. And he just like gives up of dealing with all the bullshit that's going on in this industry.
Right, right, right. I really liked that scene. Oh my god, that was one of the best scenes. And I watched this movie twice. Like, well, I watched it fully one time, and then I had it on in the background again just to like refresh my mind. But watching that scene again, it still made me laugh. Like the way Monk said "fuck," the way the characters were acting on the other end of the phone, it was so good. That was really
Yeah,
good.
it's just like he's I think he's actually trying to say fuck you to them,
Mm, mm,
but they're so concerned with being woke that they don't even realize that. They don't even realize the whole time that he's trolling them, he's making fun of them. And they're so concerned with being appropriate and all of those things, so they miss all of the points, which
mhm.
is hilarious.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I really wish though during that scene when there was the mute button and we saw Arthur and Monk fighting about renaming the book. I really wish they showed the white folks on the other side. Like, what is this nigga talking about? These niggas are crazy. I wish they showed that. But yeah, it's just a film. A
Okay.
few more things happened in between that scene that you just broke down. Lorraine says that Maynard wants to marry her. Right, so she asked Monk to be her man that walks her down the aisle. His mother is put into the retirement home, and everybody is sad. Cliff is there, and Cliff, doesn't like that his mom, called him a queer and stuff like that. And also, Monk has his first meeting on Zoom with the other writers who will be judging the literary award, and they're debating whether to read the entire book, which I think is possibly the closest the movie gets to saying that people don't even like reading books now, because even the writers don't even want to read other books that they're supposed to be judging. They're saying,
Mhm.
like, oh, let's just read the first 100 pages. And I feel like you can't judge a book, you can't judge a movie if you didn't watch it from beginning to end. You get what I'm saying? But what do you think
Yeah.
about that?
I mean, I thought, I think in general, you can tell if you're gonna like a book or not from, from the like they suggested in the movie, the first 100 pages. Now, I'm not saying that necessarily makes a good book or a bad book, but just like, your preferences, I think you can tell a little bit of the style of writing and, the story a little bit. It reveals itself. So, and that's just for the books though.
Right. But I'm just thinking about some of the movies we watched. Like, for example, Mommy Water. I didn't like the first hour of Mommy Water, but I liked the last 30 minutes, right? Book of Clarence, we did that review. You said you didn't like the first 30 minutes, but after Act 1, you were into the movie. I think the
Hmm.
same thing can be true for a book. The first 100 pages could be slow burn, character development, and then, page 200, goddamn, this, I can't put it down. You get what I'm saying? So I think you should, read an entire book before you say it's good or bad, in my opinion.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I do think like you should read it, but looking at what they had to do as judges, they probably had to read like hundreds of books. So I was just thinking, that made sense for them.
Right, right, right. Well, I don't think it was hundreds, but either way, yeah, art is subjective, obviously.
Okay. It
All
is.
right. All right, moving forward in the story, do you want to say what happened next?
What happens? So yeah, I think this is the part from what I remember where Coraline and Monk had this argument.
Mm-hmm.
So they're having dinner, and Coraline and Monk finds the book "Fuck," and it's published now, and it's best selling. It's really good, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, he finds the book "Fuck," and then he says like, "Oh, are you reading this?" And she says like, "Yeah, and I actually like it." And then he sort of like gets in his head and gets mad because he's the one who wrote the book, and he was thinking like black people shouldn't like this book because it's so stereotypical, at least,
Mm-hmm.
because if you read my previous books that were, actually good, then how can you like this book too? And
Mm-hmm.
and of course, Caroline also doesn't know that Stag is Monk.
Mm-hmm.
So she kind of like doesn't understand why he's getting so upset about this.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, they kind of, fall off.
Right,
They break up sort of.
right, right, right. I kind of thought it would have been cool if he revealed himself to be Stag right there, but that never happens in the actual story, right?
Yeah.
But what do you think? Should he have told her that's me?
I mean, yes, I do think he should have told her at least, if not the whole world. But yeah, that was just like I said, that was such a big conflict within himself that he didn't want to accept that part of him,
Mm-hmm.
and he was ashamed of Stag.
Mm-hmm.
So, and he also like always sort of looked intellectual towards all the people around him.
Mm-hmm. Right, right,
So
right,
yeah, I think he was just feeling shame
right.
about like how could this book be the bestseller and not my
Mm-hmm.
other books.
Right, right, right. So you only got about 20 minutes until you have to go to class. So let's
Yeah.
just do a speed run on the actual story. I'll just blow through it real quick. Long story short and short story long. Cliff gets accepted into the family once again when, Maynard and Lorraine get married, and he feels like they're accepting him for being gay when they even catch him in the house full of gay guys and twinks and stuff like that. The publisher is getting calls from the FBI saying, "Oh, who is this Stag Lee guy? We're looking for a fugitive and stuff like that." But they're telling the FBI it's all marketing and stuff like that. The book goes bananas, bonkers, and people love it. Even the literary people love it, and it actually wins the award for the literary prize, despite Sintara, who's also on the board, and Monk being on the board, not liking the book. And the white folks outvote them because there's 5 judges and 3 of them love the book, right? For all the wrong reasons.
It was so hilarious. Sorry, I'm just gonna interrupt you there because I think that's an important scene that we
Mm-hmm,
can like quickly recap.
mm-hmm,
Because when they're talking about fuck, Sintara doesn't like the book,
mm-hmm,
and Monk doesn't like the book, but the white people like the book,
mm-hmm.
which kind of surprises Monk that Sintara also doesn't like the book, and he says like, "How is that different from your book?" And she says like, "I did a lot of research for my book. It's inspired by real events, even though it's not my real event, so they're not the same."
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that was an interesting like discussion, I
Mm-hmm.
thought. And also like at the end when they decide the winner, they they vote for fuck, but the two black writers don't vote for the fuck, and then they choose fuck as the first one, but then the lady says, "I think it's important that we listen to black voices." It was so hilarious, but
Very,
yeah, it was
very
like
good.
downplayed and I loved it.
I mean, that conflict and that conversation between Centaura and Monk is probably the most important scene in the entire movie because it really breaks down, the conflict between black art, creating it for the masses, being true to ourselves, and also creating something complex and beautiful that has nothing to do with our blackness, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I think also an important part of that scene is they have that entire conversation, but then like another of their colleagues, the white girl comes in and says, "So, what are we talking about?" And the scene cuts, but we know that they did not continue that conversation because, once again, these sort of conversations are held behind closed doors. Like the
Mm-hmm.
same way white folks talk about everybody else behind closed doors, we have our own conversations too, and that sort of thing can't openly be discussed because, once again, the as the movie says, white folks don't want the truth; they just want absolution. They don't
Okay,
want to feel
so they
guilty.
were on code.
A little bit, I would say. They were. I mean, we don't know what happened.
Yeah.
We don't know what happened, but yeah, I definitely think that I'll say this: if there was a character or a person that wrote a book like "I Be in the Ghetto" and they do exist and it became a mega popular success, I think that book does have a right to exist and
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that.
Yeah.
And there's a powerful thing that Centaur says. It's like you're upset that I wrote this book and white people like it and they like it for the wrong reasons, but your problem isn't with me; it's with white folks, right? And that's generally how I feel about hip hop, about all forms of black media, right? I can't control the fact that white folks like 50 Cent more than they like Dead Prez, more than they like Public Enemy. I can't control that white folks like Tupac more than they like Paris the Panther. I can't control that, right? You get what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah.
But I can still appreciate all forms of black art and appreciate it for what it means to me. And I can still also, at the same time, chastise those people who only like 50 Cent or only like Eminem or only like the worst forms of black media because, they're missing the entire picture, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
all we can do is try to lead people down the right path. Because if I were to criticize Sintara's book, I then have to criticize hip hop too. And I can't do that. I can't do that.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think there's a place for both kinds of arts in every form,
Hmm.
and we also like shouldn't chastise any people, black people, any people for just like putting a work out there and then it becomes famous, really famous, and we just assume that it's made for the public eye.
Hmm.
We can't also assume that too.
Right,
So
right.
yeah.
I do think there is a responsibility though, because for example, how can I say this? Like Snoop Dogg has to be cognizant and aware that a lot of white folks look at him and follow him, and for a lot of people in the world, Snoop Dogg is the only black person that they've ever known, right? Or that's
Hmm.
the only public figure that they'll pay attention to who's black, right? There has to be some responsibility, not total
Yeah.
responsibility, but you have to be aware that your voice and how you act and the images that you put out will reflect on a lot of us, right?
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
something that I think is unique for us as black people, but that's every individual's choice, right? Like I love Tupac, and Tupac definitely represented a part of us. But I can't help the fact that when Tupac took off his shirt and said "Thug Life," that now a lot of folks will still look at that and say, "Oh, he's a thug, he's a gangster, he's a criminal," and stuff like that, and not realizing the other parts behind that. You get what I'm
Hmm.
saying?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, anyway, moving on in the story. After Fuck wins the literary award, Monk sends a message to his agent and says, "Hey, I want to make a different type of movie with Wiley. They're going to turn my book into this film, but let's change it up a bit." And so, basically, the last final scene is Monk at the literary awards, and Fuck is announced as the winner. Monk then stands up and goes to the podium and says, "I have a confession to make," in front of everybody who's in the crowd. All the writers and Coraline steps in too. And then the scene cuts to him with the director on a movie set, which makes you think, okay, did the entire movie we watch, is this the movie version of the story that
Mm.
Monk told, or is this the actual event and now we're seeing the movie? I don't know.
Mm. Okay. Okay. I didn't feel like that necessarily, but I can see how that you like some people might think like that.
Right, right. And Wiley is telling him that's not a good ending. There's no resolution and stuff like that. And people like resolutions. So then they run through several different endings. And in one ending, Monk goes to the audience and no, he leaves the auditorium and runs to Coraline's house and says, "Coraline, I haven't been feeling myself lately." And then Wiley says, "No, that's not a good ending. That will make it a rom com. We don't want to make a rom com." And so then the last ending Monk comes up with is he comes up and takes the award. The police burst in and say, "Stag Lee, get on the ground, get on the ground." And he says, "No, I'm not Stag Lee. That's a mistake. I'm just a character. It's just a character." And he's holding up the award. The police say, "He's got a gun," and they shoot him. They shoot him dead. They shoot his ass. They light his ass up like Malcolm X. And then Wiley says, "That's a perfect ending. Perfect ending. I love it. You're a genius." And so then Monk leaves the film studio. His brother is waiting for him in the auditorium from the set, and he says it's going great. You know, they're going to make the movie. They're also filming on the same set another slave film called Plantation Annihilation. And Monk sees a little black boy dressed up like a slave. He gives him a head nod. The black boy gives him the peace sign, and Monk and Cliff drive off into the sunset. And that's the end of the film. What did you think of the ending?
It was very interesting because by doing this film, he's telling the truth, right? He's telling that, okay, so I acted like somebody else and wrote this book. So this is the true story. But then the film ends just like any stereotypical black movie that, they're doing where the black person gets shot by a cop.
Mm.
So it's like an irony within itself. But I think maybe Monk was like, you give and you take. So yeah, he like did tell his version of the story, but then he also had to go out in a way that he didn't want to. He
Mm.
said like, I don't really want to, he said things like, I don't really want to like finish or have a big theme in the story. I just want to like, let it be open to conversation or something like that.
Yeah,
But
movies aren't novels.
yeah. So, but yeah, I do think like the very last scene where the head nod and the handshake, that was also like a little nod to maybe Hollywood Shuffle as well.
Mm-hmm.
I get you and you get me, and we all do things for the devil or something,
Mm-hmm.
and devil being like the industry here,
Mm-hmm.
and also white supremacy in general. But yeah. And I guess that there was just like that mutual understanding of one another's like position, because if you think about it, Monk wasn't really that different from that person who was playing the plantation slave.
Mm-hmm.
In the essence, like maybe a little bit better, but he did like succumb to an ending that he didn't really want.
Yeah, I mean, the ending was it was bittersweet because Monk sort of did ride off into the sunset. He fixed the relationship with his brother. He's now got the money to take care of his mother, but he didn't get the girl, as far as we know, because he
Mm-hmm.
says Coraline doesn't answer my text, right? And on top of that, he's still, even though he got to tell 90% of his story, his ending is still decided by the white powers that be, right? Like a white man still has to say, "Yeah, no, we want to do this to the movie, right? This is how it should end."
Yeah.
And yeah, I thought that was a very bittersweet ending, and it was very reflective for me. It made me think a lot, made me really think a lot, but it was also, somewhat victorious. And
Yeah.
that's like you said, you give and you take. That's what it means to be black. You give and you take. That's all you can do in this world, right? You got to
Mm.
take some and you lose some. you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So overall, I would say I really, really, really think this might be contender for best movie of the year. Our end of the year Oscars categories is going to be fabulous, fantastic. Um, there's a lot to break down in this movie and really talk about it for hours on end. But yeah, I'm going to give this movie a 9.5, honestly.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing, but I was thinking, okay, if Simon asked me what is the five, I don't have an answer, so I'm gonna give it a 10.
Wow, wow, 10. You know what makes this comedy different is that it has a heart, right? Like you feel warmth in some
Yeah.
sides. And it also makes you think like the warmth of this movie comes from like Lorraine and Maynard's relationship, like showing that even after death and tragedy, that life still goes on, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it shows that family can, overcome almost anything, and that success is bittersweet. There's never a total success in life. You can't have everything with it all. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really what makes the comedy special. The five that's missing for me to make it a 10, I would say, honestly, I feel like the movie could have been a bit longer.
Okay,
This might
like
sound
they could have explored more into the characters or stories.
Yeah, there could have been more things that go deeper into the parts, right? And this could have easily been a 2 hour movie, and I would not be complaining about it. I
Yeah.
feel I feel like there are scenes on the cutting room floor that would be great to add in here. So I'm just going to take that five off because there's so much that could have been added with the extra time. You know what I
Okay.
mean?
I mean, I can see that, but in the end, I didn't feel like anything was missing when I finished the movie, so I'm
Mhm.
still gonna stick with my 10.
Yeah, yeah. Really looking forward to Cord Johnson, Cord, whatever his name was, the director making more movies. Cord Johnson. Now that I think about it, that sounds like a porn name. Cord, get it? Cord Johnson.
Wow. Wow. Too much
uh,
porn.
but yeah, definitely a great movie. Everybody should check it out. It's a funny movie. It's a reflective movie. It's going to be a very high contender for best film of the year. I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Definitely.
But stay tuned for more movie reviews. Simon and Acty on X. We have a bunch on the list. You can find them on my Twitter page. All suggestions will be looked at. And thank you for listening. Shout out to the Violator and peace.